Hi everyone, hopefully you're watching this video on the front end of engaging in the resources that are here in this module that are all about survey data and quantitative data, how to analyze those. And it's important to start from this understanding, from this framework, that we are coming at our data here, survey data and quantitative data, with an improvement science lens, with an improver lens. And that is different than quantitative research. That is different than survey design research. It's almost like we take a different posture. We're more so here analyzing this type of data in order to make these improvement decisions, in order to understand for our small scale projects or the uniqueness of our context, does some of our findings make sense, or how are we seeing change as evidenced by our survey data and or our quantitative data. We are not here to extrapolate and make generalizable findings. Like, we're not here to generalize for our entire organization or for all teachers or for all nurses or things like that, right? We're here to just use this type of data to make really small scale decisions as to how our change idea is helping, or how our change idea is influencing our context. So it's really small scale. So I have some concepts that are going to be really important to think about and to orient to before you dive into these resources, because you'll see that these resources might be really different than other quantitative data analysis resources that you will encounter on the internet. Or even if you're working with AI might try to push you toward, if you're engaging quantitative data analysis, it might push you further than you need to go, or maybe I should say on a different route that's away from improvement science. So when we're thinking like an improver, we want to think that here, survey data and improvement science is about understanding stakeholder experiences, not proving statistical significance. So you're going to see some other resources in this module about, we're here for practical significance. We're not here for statistical significance. Those are two different approaches to analyzing data. Here, you're collecting feedback to learn what's working, what isn't, and what needs attention in your PDSA cycle. You use surveys to help collect that data quickly and maybe efficiently and maybe in this organized way. We're not here, again, for maybe our surveys to solve our problem of practice completely. They're here just as these little pulse points almost to get a sense on what's working, what isn't, what needs our attention in our next PDSA cycle. Again, reminder that here in this program, our goal is not for you to only conduct one 30-day PDSA cycle and that's it. All of a sudden you're an improver, you use improvement science. Our goal here, although you do that for your dissertation, we're just usually engaging in one PDSA cycle, our goal is to give you the skills and to help teach you how to engage in this improvement work so that as a leader in your organization, you can continue some of these things moving forward. So when we say next PDSA cycle, I'm not saying next PDSA cycle like you're going to engage in a second dissertation, anything like that. It's just conceptually in general. You might have remembered from the foundations lessons that this idea of good enough data collected frequently beats perfect data collected rarely, or this sense of how, as an improver, we're looking for data that's good enough. We need to make some decisions, and we need to make some decisions quickly. We might not have 3 years to collect data. It might be too long. Like we need to find these small scale steps of trying to improve some of our systems. And therefore we sometimes pull back and take this posture of good enough data versus perfect data. So small ongoing surveys or I'll say surveys, but I don't just mean surveys as in like, here's your Likert skill surveys, questionnaires, these maybe smaller scale ways in which you might extract information or collect information. Small ongoing surveys that connect to your improvement cycles are more valuable than comprehensive surveys that take months to analyze. So again, probably the surveys that you created and collected for your PDSA cycles are more along the lines of these like smaller ongoing, like they didn't take a whole lot of time. They weren't 200 questions in nature, right? Focus on practical changes that stakeholders actually notice and care about. Again, resist the urge to be too theoretical here. Your goal is to stay practical. A shift from neutral to agree on something important to daily work life matters more than statistically significant changes in areas people don't prioritize. So again, if you're talking to any, if you're taking maybe some of your findings or some of the things that you notice in your data to some other researcher, they might say a shift from neutral to agree, like, well, maybe that's a significant change. Maybe it's not. Or here, when we're working on small scales, we might not have enough data, like our sample might not be large enough to be able to make these kind of strong statistical claims. But we can look to see, even though I'm working with small scale data, I do see some shifts. And are these shifts meaningful? And let's talk to stakeholders to chat with our stakeholders and be collaborative. Like, do we see this as meaningful? And if it's shifting from neutral to agree in the way that you want it to, or it's coming alongside your aim of making change, then that might be practically significant to you. Your survey analysis, your quantitative analysis should always connect back to your improvement hypothesis and your driver diagram. Improvement hypothesis, I'm just talking about this, your theory of improvement, and maybe you created these change ideas for a reason. So in essence, there was this small scale hypothesis there. You assume that if I engage in this change idea, it's going to influence this secondary driver, which will increase or decrease the primary driver, which will support my overarching aim, right? Like that's how we read our driver diagram. So here, every question you analyze should help you understand whether your change ideas are working or where to focus your improvement efforts next. But everything should point back to your improvement hypothesis and driver diagram. They should point back to your theory of improvement and some of your essential aims here. And that mixed or surprising results are valuable information. They're not failures. If you're working for a leader and they disregard mixed or surprising results, you might feel that they are a little closed-minded, or that they're only looking for things that confirm some of their expectations or confirm their assumptions. It's really important as leaders and as improvers that we take this posture of being open and empathetic and perspective taking. And so do that here with your survey and your quantitative data too. We don't see mixed results or surprising results, these, I don't know, something that just stands out to you as I didn't expect that, as not valuable. They're also not failures. We can still learn a lot from them. When some measures improve while others don't, or when you see split responses, that tells you exactly where to dig deeper and what to adjust in your approach. And that's something you can bring back to your stakeholders of hey, I had these mixed responses here, these mixed findings, and how do we make sense of that? What does this mean for us? Or a lot of people came back to me with this one thing that really surprised me. Wow, I had no idea. And that helps inform maybe my next change idea, or helps inform a whole other system. Or you might realize that this is going to create a whole nother section of my driver diagram. There's a whole nother driver here that I had no idea about. And it kind of came to fruition by some of this analysis here. If I can leave you with 3 coaching tips. Tip number 1, keep your improvement context front and center. Not the whole world, not your entire problem of practice, but your context. As you work through each step, constantly ask yourself, how does this help me understand if my intervention is working? Rather than just, what do these numbers mean? And we can really get bogged down with this with quantitative analysis in particular. Here you'll be engaging in descriptive statistics. So you have to ask yourself, 1, figure out what, let's say, the median is, or what the mean is, or what the mode is. But it's not just that, right? It's then asking yourself, well, what does this mean? And how does this help me know if my change idea is working? If the things I'm doing are helping to improve this system, right? That's where we're going. So keep your improvement context front and center. Tip number 2, start simple and build confidence. Especially when you're working with survey data, you might be working with Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. the first time you try to run some of these things and analyses or even create your spreadsheet, like it's not, trust me. I don't know a single doctoral student who has, and neither myself, where the very first thing I create is perfect and exactly what I need. I'm usually troubleshooting a lot, or I might be taking a few things and practicing with them and see before I even think about engaging my whole data set with them. Okay, so consider focusing on 2 to 3 of your most important survey questions first, or your quantitative questions, right? Like, so again, surveys also the quantitative questions that you have. Get comfortable with the analysis process, then expand to other questions, especially if you've never engaged in some of the quantitative analysis steps that are offered here that you might need in order to understand your surveys. Don't try to analyze everything at once. You think you will save time. You won't. So really, like, start with just a few prompts, just a few questions, just a few pieces of data. Play around with it before you take that to your entire data set. And tip number 3, think like you're explaining to a colleague. This is especially when you're writing your interpretations. So you're not trying to explain what the median is to someone who doesn't understand what the median is in terms of mathematical concept of median, right? Like, you're trying to explain as like also in the context of like, what does this mean? Sometimes, and you have likely found this a lot in quantitative research reports in particular, is sometimes authors, researchers will just kind of, and maybe you have leaders in your context who do this too, where they just kind of share a quantitative output and then just kind of leave it there and assume that everybody reading that output knows how to read it and how to understand that data. And that's often not the case. And so in whatever ways, as you're working through this project, you can also be a leader who knows how to describe and interpret some of these findings for an audience or for your colleagues in a way that it makes sense, not just for your dissertation committee, not just for your dissertation chair or other people in a doctoral program, but for your colleagues in your context. So when writing interpretations, imagine you're telling a trusted coworker what you learned and what you plan to do next. This keeps your language practical and your insights actionable rather than getting lost in statistical details. If you are using some examples of like quantitative research articles, like you have in your Creswell and Gutterman text, or maybe you're working with AI and AI is helping you analyze some of your quantitative findings and help giving you some sentence structures for your interpretation, just be really careful. Like, well, are these examples good examples for your context, for your colleagues? And my hunch is no. Like, this, your text here, Creswell and Gutterman, it's written for like educational context, but it's written for educational researchers, right? And when you're engaging in this work as a leader, like, please don't just spit out paragraphs that you wrote in your dissertation, or that sound really academic and full of academic jargon to your colleagues. I'd rather you write your dissertation in a very practical way, to write these interpretations up in a very practical way, so that when your colleague does sit down with a cup of 2 or 3 cups of coffee to read your dissertation, which will they or won't they, right? That they'll understand it. You will later on this program get some tips for how to present these findings to others. I doubt people will sit down and read your dissertation. You will want to create some much more engaging and kind of brief methods of conveying your findings and reporting your findings out to your organization. So you'll get some other support there. But keep these tips in mind as you're working with your surveys, as you're working with other forms of quantitative data. And be really, really careful with how you are cleaning up your data in spreadsheets. There's some tips here in this resource module for that. And you also probably have a number of resources applicable to you. The last thing I'll probably say is that the internet is there for you. And so if there's something that you're having trouble with in Excel or Google Sheets, Google's going to be your best friend, right? Like, or like AI tips and strategies and formulas is going to be your best friend. So use those resources there. The resources that are here in this module are there to help get you started and should help frame how you need to analyze some of your quantitative data and your survey data. But it doesn't mean that it's the only way, or that these are all the resources that you need. You might need something a little different. And so if you have questions, you can chat with your chair. But for the most part, make sure that you're staying focused on your improvement context and you're keeping this posture of improvement science methodology at the heart of it. All right, good luck.